let's get started. What's your name?
I'm Michael Bennett.
And where are you from?
I'm from Toronto, Ontario.
You already said that, didn't you? From
No.
the meetup thing? No.
Oh,
yeah.
well, kind of.
Okay. And tell us what you're going to be showing us today.
We're going to be looking at how easy it can be to update an existing application to Vue in the context of a side project, video gamey type thing.
All right. The floor is yours.
All right, thanks very much. So again, I'm Michael Bennett. I work at a company called Wrangle.io. We do JavaScript. We can probably help you out to stop by our booth. And so I'd like to talk about how easy it can be to update an app to Vue. Now this app, it's kind of like a game. Came around out of an airplane trip I took out east a few years ago, thinking, oh, I could make something that looks sort of like a block-dropping Tetris-style game. We did do it, so we can line up these colors and play the game. But there's sort of a little quirk to it. Initially, I did it because I wanted to learn a little bit about React. And obviously, we're here to talk about Vue, but this game works in React too. So you can actually switch to React in real time. And you'll notice that if I drop down my div, there we go, we can see all of the, getting a little closer. All right. Oh. Anyway, doesn't really matter, but you can see it in React. We can switch live as well. Angular takes a second to load there because we're in dev mode and the bundle's a little bit large in dev mode. And again, we can switch back to Vue, all real time, and the DOM, as you can see, is flipping around. So in order to update this game to Vue, the first thing I did was, well, I had to learn Vue, and I didn't know anything about Vue at the time. So we're going to see some code that is not dogmatic Vue. And I apologize in advance. You might want to cringe at some of the bits, but fortunately there's other speakers here who are going to tell you the way to do it correctly. So the first thing I needed to do was get my state into the app. Now, I'm a Redux developer. I'm used to that. Vue obviously has its own Vuex library, which is really, really good. You should use it. But if you have an existing Redux app, it can be really easy to get your state into the system. So in most cases, you might want to use an actual library to do this. But wanting to learn how this actually worked, I just did this little store.subscribe and popped my whole state straight into a Vue root component, and life just worked. Because the thing about Vue is the abstractions are really nice, the API is really clean, and it generally just does exactly what you want it to do. So by just doing this store.getState, whenever store updates, I was able to hook in Redux really, really easily. No problems there at all. And as you can see, if I flip onto my Redux DevTools, this is, it doesn't quite work on the screen here, but you can kind of see some of the actions trickling through. So that was the first challenge that I had to deal with, and this was a pretty simple solution. Then the next thing I needed to do was routing, because this app has, a grand total of 2 routes, but they still needed to be updated. So the first thing I thought was, oh, I'm going to get a library and do this. But when I read the Vue documentation, it said, oh, we can do routes really easily. All you have to do is just basically have them in a list and then get the app to switch. And I thought, OK, that's a little bit easier than using a library and having to learn yet another thing. Let's try that. So I wrote out my 2 routes, or a default here. It's just an object, nothing to it. And then plugged it in more or less with some really ugly code here, but more or less the way they have it in the docs there. Just dropped in a little render function, had to learn what that was. Obviously, this is not the cleanest looking render function, but it's working. So that was routing. It was just that easy. I just had to do this little redraw business, route, and load up a list. There's not really any fiddling to do. It just worked out of the box. I was really amazed at how easy it was to just adapt that in there. So with routing and with state, my app was pretty much done. The next step for me was to do components. It's like, all right, great. So I'm reading the Vue docs. There's the Vue doc component. All right, global registry. Didn't really, at the time, take a second to learn what that was doing, because I was actually supposed to be talking about the app the next day. So I was mostly focused on getting it actually made. And I didn't really understand at the time how simple components were in Vue. I'm so used to thinking about classes and decorators and all sorts of other stuff that it didn't occur to me that a component is essentially just an object with a template prop. That's all you really need, and that kind of blew my mind when I got into it. So here is an example component that I've done. I like functions, so I didn't use the actual Vue component system. I mean, you've seen all the wonderful .vue files that you can make now, but this served my purposes for this game really well. I just had a function, it returns an object, the object has props on it, It's got a template, and that's it. That was all it took to update Vue. Then I had to just knock out a few more templates for things like the blocks and whatnot, and it all just worked. And then, after all of that, getting it in, it only took, because it's a very simple app, it only took a couple hours that night, along with learning. After all of that, I went to bundle it, and this was one of my favorite things. So I bundle it, and I have a full package that comes in after gzipping at 54K, with Vue, with the game, with all of that. And all of the other frameworks that I did came in at much larger values. And that's actually all I've got about Vue and updating a game. It was pretty simple, and I highly recommend Vue. You're all here, obviously, to do that, so that's it.